Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. I have talked before about Windows PE, Windows Pre-Installation Environment, and I've shown you how to get it working with things like PXE booting on a network. But I don't know that I've ever covered how to create the original ISO image, so I thought I would show that to you guys today. The reason for this is my current Windows PE image is based on Windows 2022, but now that I need to also be deploying Server 2025, I figured I'm going to have to update my Windows PE source to the Windows 2025 variant. So let's just do that and make sure that I've got everything up to speed with all the updates necessary. So here we go. First thing that you'll want to do is take a look at downloading and installing the Windows ADK. Not just the ADK, but you also need the Windows PE add-on. This is the December 2024 version. At the time of filming, that this is the most recent version available. There are others, older versions. This is for Windows 11 version 22H2. This is a newer version than that, but not quite as new as the December 2024 version. I'm just going to go with that because it is the most recent. That's what I'm looking for. When you install it, what you are likely to see in the main ADK, there's a lot of different options that you can choose to install. But the ones that you really want to look at are just the deployment tools. This has the DISM tool, it has OEM activation, it has Windows System Image Manager. That is very important. And it has OS CD image, etc., so that you can actually create valid ISO files. So that's most important. I also added Configuration Designer because occasionally I play around with it. But for the purposes of Windows PE, you really just need the deployment tools. That's the key thing to have. And when you install the Windows PE add-on, there's only one option to choose, and that's Windows Pre-Installation Environment. Done. Sorted. That's all you need to worry about. So when you install both of those, you'll be ready to get started with creating bootable Windows PE media. The thing at the top is to update it, which is for the September 2023 and earlier variant. Since we're getting the December 2024 variant, we don't need to worry about updating the Windows PE add-on. We can skip right past all of this and just go to step 1, create working files. Cool. You've got the deployment and imaging tools environment recently added, or just scroll down to it under Windows Kits. And when you run as administrator, have to make sure you run as administrator because that's necessary for everything that DISM wants to do. You can just do the whole copy PE thing, and it will stage it. It's actually mounting the WIM file and then copying the necessary boot files out of it. That will later be compiled into the ISO. Or alternately, you can also deploy it directly to a flash drive. I always create an ISO because then I can boot it in a virtual machine, and I can take that exact same ISO and use a tool like Rufus or other tools like Balena Etcher and write that to a flash drive separately. So having the ISO file for me means I can do both scenarios with one compilation, and that's useful. Okay, so it is staged that. And if we pop over here, WinPE, AMD64, there's boot bins, a couple of different versions here. There's media, a lot of files in here. And then mount. Mount is currently empty, but we will be using it in just a moment. Once you've created your working files, the second step is to customize Windows PE. There's several common customizations. Most commonly, device drivers, packages, and background image, power scheme. I'm going to show you the ones that I do specifically, which is first, you need to do any of this customization, you need to actually mount the image to that mount directory that we were looking at earlier. And this command from Microsoft does not include the check integrity command, but I always like to include that because making sure that the WIM is actually good and isn't corrupted at any point goes a long way to making sure that it works in the end. All right, so now that that has been mounted, if we go into mount, we see that there's actually files now. This is what's in our WIM. So first thing, add device drivers. Most of the time, you could expect that you don't actually need to add drivers, but I have come across at least one network card that does not have a driver in Windows PE, certainly not the server variant of Windows PE. And this is why I'm talking about it. I had to modify this driver file. NDIS68, this is something that I customized for Server 2022. And I haven't tested it in 2025 yet, but I'm betting that it will still work because Windows Server 2022, to the best of my memory, is using NDIS 6.88. And 2025 is using NDIS 6.89. So it should still be the version 6.8 driver that works. I'm not going to go into the depths of how I customized this driver file, but essentially, in the INF, there's a lot of device definitions, and it says precisely which variant of Windows it will actually install on. Any place you see 10.0.1, that is a client version of Windows. So only Windows 10, Windows 11, etc. Whereas anything under 10.0 without the 0.1 is any version of Windows, client or server. Intel, for whatever reason, decided to make the driver limited to, or at least the driver for the specific device that I needed was only permitted to be installed on client versions of Windows. But I want this driver to work on server versions. And it is capable of doing so. All I had to do was find the correct device and copy that into a section that was said, okay, all versions of Windows are allowed to use this driver. Cool. But by doing so, I've also invalidated the driver signature. So in order to actually install the driver, which is DISM, add driver image. It is this image directory. Driver is, again, but not that directory. It is ndis 68/e2f.inf. Oops, there we go. And because I've invalidated the driver signature by modifying it, I have to do force unsigned. There we go. Successfully installed. This is not something that necessarily you have to do yourself, but it's a possibility. All right, so that's the driver. Now, the packages. Yeah, the packages. There's a lot of possible packages that you can add. If you take a look at the full list, there's quite a few of them. So there's enough of them, and they are sensitive to the order, that I actually made myself a list previously. Oh, there we go. So this list includes a lot of things like WMI, NetFX, scripting, PowerShell, yada, yada, yada. And where there is a language pack as well, you have to install a language pack as well after the main component. Some of these don't have language components, like Platform ID, there's no language component. The secure boot commandlets, there's no language component. But most of them do have a language component. And like I said, this is order dependent. So how do you know what order to go with? Well, some of this will be given to you. For example, if I want the DISM commandlets to be able to manage and service Windows images, you need to have WMI, then you need to have NetFX, then you need to have scripting, then you need to have PowerShell, and then you need to have DISM commandlets. And this is also true for things like secure boot commandlets. You need to have all of those installed as well. If you want storage WMI, again, same sequence. So this is important to pay attention to, but it will depend very much on what you want to put in there, because every one of these components that you put in there makes your WIM file, your boot.wim, larger, and it will take longer to load over a network, or if you're actually booting from an optical disk, it will take a little bit longer to read in. So add what you need, or what you have a relatively good probability of needing, and don't worry too much about the rest of it. I'm just going to copy everything that I already know that I need, and I'm going to paste it in here. And that will just go right ahead and add the packages one after the other. While it's doing that, let's talk a little bit about adding additional files and folders. If you put those in there, when boot.wim is read in, it will load everything into a RAM disk, which will be at X. And if you put it into the boot.wim, it will be in your X drive. You can also put it in the main media folder, which, if we remember for a moment, we have media here. Anything in the media folder will also be copied onto the ISO or onto the flash drive. And it will be accessible, but it won't be read into the RAM disk. The RAM disk is only the contents of boot.wim. So it's up to you to determine, is having it on the ISO or the flash drive good enough, or do you need to lock it into the boot.wim so it'll be in the RAM disk? There's benefits. If you put it in the RAM disk, you can take the flash drive that you use to boot the machine out and move to another computer. Everything in the RAM disk will still be available. But obviously anything on the flash drive wouldn't be available if you pulled it out and walked away. So figure that out as you wish. The startup script, we are going to work on the startup script. But first, I'm just going to come back here and say, hey, we just finished adding packages. Excellent. So with those all added, let's go ahead and take a look at the startup script, because that's under Windows, System 32, and it is startnet.cmd. By default, all this does is initialize Windows PE. And that's a good thing to keep in there. But it's really, really helpful to add at least one other command, which is to, oh, it's not in here. Okay, well, that's fine. It's to set the power scheme to high performance. And this talks about editing the startnet command file and adding this specific command for the high performance power plan. This actually makes a big difference. Without it, it's in balanced performance mode, and transferring files or doing other work that involves mounting files, it will limit the CPU's performance in order to preserve power efficiency. If you're working in pre-installation environment, you're probably doing so for a reason, which is you want to get the system up and running. So high performance unlocks those restrictions and lets it go much faster. Much faster. I highly recommend including this power configuration command, which again is right here under set the power scheme to high performance. And yes, supposedly it can make the device run hotter than usual. That makes sense, but you might notice that when you go to save this, it brings up a save as. What's that about? You shouldn't. I just opened it. Why do I have to save as? Well, I want to save it as that. So how about I just hit save? Yes, I want to replace it. I don't have permission to open this file. Why not? What's going on with that? Well, the boot.wim opens specifically where everything requires administrator rights. There are no rights for regular users to be able to write to these files. You have to be an administrator in order to do so. So if you're going to do that, you need to open Notepad as an administrator, and you can't drag from a regular user session into an admin user session. So you have to go open, and we'll look, okay, mount system 32, that's right. I want to open StartNet. All right, I'm gonna paste my power configuration there. Now I can save it. Cool. And you can see that the modification time has updated accordingly. Replacing the background image. I do like to replace the background image. Number one, adds a little more personality instead of a plain blue background. But it also says here, you can set the background image so you can instantly tell which version is running. If you have multiple versions of Windows PE in your toolkit, it might be really handy to be able to look at it and go, oh, that's the one for this purpose. Oh, that's the one for that purpose over there. Okay. But it has all of this stuff about what you have to do to be able to change it. I'll show you what you're needing to do and why. So here's your built-in WinPE.jpg. If you look at it, not even administrators are allowed to touch this file. Only trusted installer is allowed to touch this file. So if you want to change it, first you have to go in, set your location to your local machine. You can say administrators, cool. Hit OK, go back in, and now you'll be able to change permissions because you're the owner. You can edit this, set it to full control. Cool. All right. I have an appropriate WinPE.jpg sitting right on my desktop, so I'll paste that in now. Yep, and I need to do it as administrator, so I'll give the permission for that. Cool. Now we've gone from a 1 kilobyte file to an 80 kilobyte file. To change it, the permissions back, because I want to make sure that I change it back, this part might be optional, but I like to do it anyway. I will change permissions, set this back to what it was before, which is just read and execute. All right. I will apply that, and then I will change the permissions. Now, trusted installer is an interesting one. If you just go in and say trusted installer, it can't be found. What you actually need to do is do ntservice / trusted installer. This will only work as long as the location is your local machine, because I tried it in an earlier attempt to demonstrate this while this location was still set to my domain, and it failed, which led me down a wonderful little goose chase of trying to figure out, do I have this wrong? No, I have it correct. It's just the location was wrong. But if you do ntservice trusted installer, that will work, and that will set it back to exactly what it was before. Cool. So now you've changed your Windows PE background, and you've changed your startup script. We've added a driver, and we've added optional components, that should basically be it for the customizations that we want to add. There are a couple of other things you could do. You can add your own app, or you can investigate adding updates if necessary. I'm not going to do all of that because I've downloaded the most up-to-date version as it is. So then you can just unmount, and then this command is to create a USB flash drive. I'm actually going to swap back to creating bootable media. Now, in this case, I still need to unmount it first, because if I don't unmount it, it won't be what I'm looking for. And I'm going to show you something. If not mount, whoops. If I go into media, sources, boot.wim, this starts out at 332,000 KB, give or take. All right. Let's rewind back to where we were mounting the image. And we're going to change this to the appropriate unmount command. Unmount image, mount dir, and we need to say that we want to commit the changes while checking the integrity of the WIM. It will go through, save all the changes that we've made, all of the additional driver, the optional components, the new background file, and the new startup script. It will save all of the changes, and then it will unmount the WIM file. But when it does so, it's also adding a little bit of extra maintenance tracking to it. Over time, the more customizations you apply, the more possibility you have that something is going to get garbled. It's going to get glitched up. It's going to get corrupted. And then your WIM file won't work anymore. Which, if you've been steadily adding items to it over 3 or 4 years, that can be a lot of stuff that you've suddenly lost. And it can, recovering and retracing your steps through everything that you had added can be a challenge. So to prevent that, every time I update the WIM, I also export a clean copy of it so that I have the exact copy that I want, nothing more. So in this case, dism export image. You know what? I'm going to make this a little easier on myself. Go all the way back up to my original mount. And I'm going to make this export image. This is the source image file, is boot.wim. Source index 1. And then I'm going to do destination image file. And I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to call it new boot. Very creative, I know. New boot. I'm going to compress max and check integrity. Export image, source image file. Yep. Source index, destination image file. Compress max, check integrity. There we go. And when I do that, you'll notice that we've gone from 492,000 kilobytes down to 483,000. So the change from 480 megabyte to 472 megabyte, we've saved 8 megabytes off of our image. Is that a lot? No, it's not a lot, but it's 8 megabytes of extra data that wasn't needed, and which, if it became corrupted in future, would ruin the whole thing. So it's just keeping it clean by exporting a clean copy every single time. That's all I'm doing. So now actually creating the ISO. Because like I said, you can create a bootable USB drive directly. I'm going to create an ISO. And there's an additional switch in this that I'm going to use to create 2 copies of the ISO. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to do this one. I'm going to say V2011, and I'll show you why in a minute. Creates an ISO file, and hey, you're good. Then I'm going to create a 2023 version, and I'm going to add the bootx flag. Now, why did I do 2 copies, and what does this extra bootx flag actually do? Let's take a look at that. These look pretty darn close, 527 megabytes each. If I open it with 7-zip and take a look at it, it's going to be much the same structure in both cases. But if you go to the EFI boot folder, and let's extract bootx 64, and I'm going to label this as the -2011 version. Cool. Let's close that and do the same for the 2023 version. EFI boot. Let's take bootx 64, extract it, close that, and this one we're going to label the 2023 version. If you take a look at the 2011 version, the digital signature, details, view certificate, this is issued by Microsoft Windows Production PCA 2011. This is the original certificate that validates all your UEFI stuff in Windows. But PCA 2011 is only valid until October 2026. And it's currently June 2025. Starting back in 2023, Microsoft has been laying the groundwork to replace that certificate. And if you use the bootx flag, it uses a copy of bootx 64 that is issued by Windows UEFI CA 2023. And in that case, that's the certificate that is going to replace the 2011 certificate. Not all PCs trust this yet. If you use the 2023 version on a PC or a virtual machine that doesn't trust that certificate, it'll just skip right past it and it will pretend like it never even saw that boot file. So you can tell it to boot off of the ISO and it'll just skip over it like it didn't even see it. That's because it doesn't trust this certificate. Conversely, when the 2011 certificate expires, or if part of Windows update procedure for doing this is actually going to include revoking the 2011 certificate so it can't be used anymore, you'll get the same thing. If you try to boot off of the 2011 certificate where it's no longer trusted, it's just going to skip past it. But it'll probably boot off the 2023 version. So the reason that I've created both of these ISOs is because I want to be able to use them in future regardless of what certificate it trusts. If it works on the 2011 version, that's probably what I'm going to use first because that's the current default. If it works with that, great. I can just keep on going. If it doesn't work, then I might need to switch to the 2023 version. And that will probably work if the 2011 one does not. So I'm hedging my bets into the future and figuring out, okay, well, let's use this extra bootx flag just to get the additional version there. And actually, if we look at the boot bins again, that's what these are. This boot manager firmware.efi is the 2011 version. If we look at it, you'll be able to see that. There it is. It's the 2011 version. And if you use the EX version, that's going to be the 2023 certificate signature right there. So when you use the bootx flag, it's going to use these _EX files rather than the regular 2011 signed files. Windows is actually planning for this transition. So it's a good thing to know about. But basically, that's it. Now that you've got your ISO files, like I said, you can boot those directly into a virtual machine, or you can use a tool like Rufus to copy that out to a USB disk and boot off of that. Either one will work. And that's basically the process. Trust me, it does not go this quickly the first time you do it, but with practice, you'll be able to get the hang of it. And hey, if something doesn't work out, it's perfectly valid for you to go unmount everything that you were doing and then delete the whole directory and start over from scratch if you have to. So there's that flexibility. Otherwise, that's probably it for today. If you have any thoughts on things that you would like to see me demonstrate or things that you'd like to hear me talk about, feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door NetAdmin, and we will see you next time.